I slept with my brother's wife just to ruin him. And I don't regret it. That's the truth, plain and simple. No excuses, no regrets. I know what I did was wrong by most people's standards, but honestly, it felt like the only way to get back at a life that never gave me a fair shot. My brother, Eliot, always had everything handed to him on a silver platter. Looks, charm, a brilliant career, and a wife who seemed like she stepped out of a magazine. Meanwhile, I was stuck watching from the sidelines, like a background actor in the story of his perfect life. Growing up, Eliot was the golden boy. Our parents adored him, neighbors praised him, and teachers had high hopes for him. I was the quieter one, the shadow, the kid who was good enough but never quite enough. Where Eliot was charismatic and confident, I was brooding and overlooked. I won't lie, it stung, and it still stings. Eliot climbed the corporate ladder in finance like it was a walk in the park. He managed to land a cushy job at one of the top firms in the city, and he wasn't just successful, he was beloved. Everyone wanted to be around Eliot because he was smart, funny, and genuinely kind. The kind of guy who remembered your birthday and actually meant it. His life looked flawless on Instagram, with perfect dates, weekend trips, and of course, Sarah. Sarah, his wife. She was stunning, smart, and seemed like the kind of woman who could do no wrong. Everyone said they were the perfect match. She was the glue that held his world together, the calm to his storm. To me, they looked like the ultimate power couple, the kind you resent but can't help admiring from afar. And then there was me, Christian, the brother who never quite made it. I had a decent job, but nothing like Eliot's. I moved from one dead-end gig to another, struggling to find my place. I lived alone in a cramped apartment on the other side of town, trying to convince myself I was happy. But the truth was, every time I saw Eliot smiling, every time Sarah called his name with that sweet affection, it felt like a punch in the gut. Our family dinners were rare but always awkward. Mom would smile too hard, trying to keep the peace, while Dad praised Eliot's latest promotion like it was a national holiday. I'd sit there nursing my drink, pretending I wasn't dying inside. Eliot would crack jokes, charming everyone around him, while Sarah looked radiant as ever. It was like I was invisible. I knew I was jealous. Not just jealous, but bitter. I told myself it was because I deserved more love, more success, more respect. I hated that Eliot was the favorite, the one everyone rooted for, while I was the forgotten middle child. It wasn't just envy, it was a deep, gnawing feeling that I'd been dealt the short end of the stick my whole life. Some nights, I'd lie awake thinking about what it would take to finally get even. Not just to get even with Eliot, but to prove to myself that I could be the one who mattered. That I wasn't some loser stuck in his brother's shadow. The idea came to me slowly at first, like a dark whisper in the back of my mind. What if I broke him? What if I tore apart the perfect life he'd built? What if I showed everyone that Eliot wasn't untouchable? That thought grew louder over time, and I wasn't sure if it was madness or just survival instinct. I knew Eliot loved Sarah more than anything. She was his weakness, his anchor. So maybe she was the key. I wasn't going to just watch anymore. I was going to act. Carefully, methodically. And I was going to enjoy every second of watching his perfect world crumble. Because if life had never been fair to me, then maybe it was time to be unfair to him. That's where my story begins. Not as the hero, not as the victim, but as the man who decided to rewrite the rules. And I'm just getting started. Sarah was beautiful. There was no denying that. But beneath the flawless exterior was a woman quietly unraveling in a marriage that everyone else seemed to think was perfect. That was the secret. Nobody really saw Sarah. Not the way I did. She wasn't just Eliot's trophy wife, the smiling, graceful woman who complimented his success. Sarah had cracks, doubts, fears. I caught glimpses of them the first time we met alone, just the two of us, at a little cafe not far from Eliot's office. It was supposed to be a casual meeting, but I had my own agenda, and Sarah was my gateway. She arrived late, flustered, wearing that effortless kind of beauty that looked like she woke up that way but was actually carefully curated. Her eyes were tired, though, like she was carrying a secret burden. I could tell she wasn't happy. Not really. "You look exhausted," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice held a hint of concern. Sarah shrugged and forced a smile. "It's just work. And life, I guess. Sometimes it feels like I'm invisible, even in my own home. That hit me hard. Invisible. That was exactly how I felt compared to Eliot. But for Sarah, it was something different. A loneliness within the walls of a marriage that should have been her safe place. We talked for hours, walking through a nearby park afterwards, the crisp air making her cheeks glow. She opened up about things she never said out loud. The endless dinners with Eliot's colleagues where she felt like a prop. The silent nights where he was more interested in his phone than her. The subtle disappointment that never got spoken. I don't know when the us disappeared, she admitted quietly, eyes fixed on the ground. Sometimes I wonder if he even notices me anymore. I listened closely, letting her pour out everything she'd been holding back. I asked questions that made her think, made her feel heard. I complimented her on things Eliot probably took for granted. Her laugh, the way she tilted her head when she was nervous, the way her eyes lit up talking about her dreams. Small moments she rarely shared. With every word I felt her walls come down a little more. Sarah wasn't cold or calculating. She was just deeply unhappy, and maybe a little lost. Back at Eliot's house, where I was technically an intruder but felt strangely at home, I saw that side of Sarah even clearer. The way she moved around the kitchen, distant and distracted. The forced smiles when Eliot entered the room. The brief glances that said, "Please notice me." One evening, after a family dinner that felt more like a show than anything real, Sarah and I found ourselves alone in the living room. The tension between us was undeniable. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "All the time," I replied. "Sometimes I think the world expects us to be a certain way. Perfect, successful, happy. But inside, it's chaos." She nodded slowly, looking at me with a mix of relief and sadness. I've been so afraid to admit that, even to myself. It was then I realized something important. Sarah wasn't a villain in this story. She was a victim too, trapped in a life where her happiness was sacrificed for appearances. That made her vulnerable, and vulnerabilities are like keys to locked doors. I decided to be the one she could trust, even if just for a moment. Because trust is powerful. Trust can break down barriers, and trust can change everything. Over the next few weeks we met more often. Coffee, lunch breaks, walks in the park. Each meeting chipped away at the walls she'd built around herself. She laughed more when I was around. She shared dreams she'd buried. She admitted fears she'd never voiced. One day, as we sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline, Sarah took my hand hesitantly. "I don't know what this is," she said, eyes searching mine. "But for the first time in a long time, I feel like someone sees me." I smiled, knowing exactly what I wanted to do next. Sarah was already halfway mine, not in the way Eliot thought, but in a way that would change everything. I wasn't just playing with fire, I was controlling it. That's when I knew. I had found the weak link, and soon enough, I'd use it to bring Eliot down. I never expected falling into this game to feel so electric. Every moment with Sarah was a calculated move, a dance on the edge of something dangerous, and I loved it. Our meetings had become routine, yet every time felt new. One night, I invited her to my apartment under the pretense of showing her some work I was doing. The place was small but cozy, with dim lighting and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Sarah arrived looking both nervous and curious, a mixture that I found intoxicating. We talked about everything and nothing, from her childhood memories to the absurdity of Eliot's latest work crisis. I cracked jokes, watched her laugh, and saw the way her eyes softened. The atmosphere shifted gradually. The distance between us diminished like the fading twilight outside the window. Later, we ended up at a quiet bar downtown, a place with low music and shadowed corners perfect for private conversations. I ordered her a glass of wine, and she accepted it with a hesitant smile. "You know," she said, swirling the liquid in her glass, "I never thought I'd be doing this, sitting here with you, talking like old friends. Old friends can surprise you," I replied, watching her reaction carefully. Her laugh was soft but genuine. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist, just us, caught in a web spun of words, glances, and unspoken promises. On our walk back, the city lights flickered around us, casting long shadows on the pavement. Sarah's hand brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, thick with tension. At my apartment, everything felt charged, like we were standing at the edge of a precipice. "Sarah," I said quietly, "do you know what you're doing?" She looked at me, vulnerability and defiance battling in her eyes. "Maybe I don't." I stepped closer, closing the gap, feeling the heat from her body even through the thin fabric of her coat. "This isn't about love," I said bluntly. "It's a game, and I intend to win." Her breath hitched. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to run, but instead she stayed. We moved slowly, like two players carefully placing their pieces on the board. The first time we touched, it wasn't about passion or tenderness. It was cold, clinical, almost mechanical, a calculated step in a plan years in the making. I watched her face closely. Fear, guilt, but also a flicker of something else. Desire. She was caught between wanting to escape and being pulled deeper into the trap. We didn't say much. Words were unnecessary. The unspoken rules of this game were clear. Afterward, lying next to her, I felt a rush of power unlike anything before. Control. Victory. The intoxicating knowledge that I had crossed a line Eliot never imagined I would. Sarah turned her head, eyes wide and searching. "What are we doing, Christian?" I smiled, a cold edge to it, exactly what I planned. There was irony in that moment, the fact that she, Eliot's perfect wife, was now playing by my rules. The joke was on him, and I was the punchline. Days passed in a blur of secret meetings and stolen touches. We joked, we argued, we pushed each other's buttons with sharp wit and softer smiles. There was a strange kind of intimacy in our battles, a game where every move mattered. Sarah's confusion was palpable. Sometimes she'd lash out, angry and scared, calling me names I didn't flinch at. Other times, she'd confess her doubts and dreams, like a lost soul grasping for something real. And I thrived in it. The thrill of the chase, the control, the knowledge that I was unraveling everything Eliot had built. It fueled me. By the time I realized it, I was already in too deep. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a war, and Sarah was my weapon. The line between hate and desire blurred, but I didn't care. I was winning, and I wasn't about to stop. I had waited a long time for this moment. Every step, every whispered word between me and Sarah, every secret meeting, it all led here, to the moment when Eliot would finally see what I'd done and feel the full weight of it. It wasn't going to be some grand showdown in a crowded place. No, that would be too easy, too obvious. I wanted it to hurt in the most personal way possible. So I chose the family dinner at Eliot's house, a night when everything seemed perfect and the cracks underneath would shatter. I'd been watching them for weeks, listening in on conversations, the casual mentions, the silent looks between Eliot and Sarah. Sarah was careful, but even she couldn't hide everything from me. I had pieces, bits of proof collected like a hunter's trophies. The night arrived. Eliot's suburban home was filled with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses. The table was set perfectly, white linen, candles flickering softly, and the unmistakable aroma of Sarah's cooking wafting through the air. Their friends and a few family members were there too, oblivious to the storm about to break. I arrived late, as if by chance, carrying a bottle of scotch and a practiced smile. Eliot greeted me warmly, completely unaware. I returned the gesture with a coldness only family drama can explain. As the night wore on, I casually slipped away from the group, heading toward the living room where Sarah and Eliot were speaking quietly. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, cold, controlled. I pulled out my phone, opening a message from Sarah. It contained photos, a few innocuous at first, but then pictures of us together, unmistakable and damning. I didn't need to say a word. This was my evidence, my knife in Eliot's back. I positioned myself so they could see me. And then I let it happen. Sarah looked at me, a silent plea in her eyes, but I ignored it. I tapped the screen and showed the photos to Eliot. His face went pale. The color drained away, leaving behind the shock that only betrayal can bring. "Christian, what is this?" His voice cracked, disbelief mixing with raw pain. I smiled. "The truth, Eliot. The truth you never wanted to face." He dropped his fork, trembling. His eyes locked on Sarah's, the perfect wife who wasn't so perfect after all. "Why?" His voice was a broken whisper. "Because you had everything," I said softly, stepping closer. and I had nothing. But now you'll have to see me, really see me. Eliot's hands clenched into fists, anger bubbling to the surface. You're a monster. Maybe, I shrugged, enjoying the sting in his eyes. But I'm your monster, and I'm done hiding. Tears streamed down his face as the room grew silent. Friends looked around awkwardly, sensing the tension but not fully understanding the tragedy unfolding. Sarah's face was pale, but defiant. It's not all Christian's fault, she said quietly, looking at her husband. There were things broken here before. I smirked inwardly. How true that was. Watching Eliot crumble was a satisfaction unlike any I'd known, not just because I'd hurt him, but because I'd shattered the image of perfection that everyone had built around him. He was human, flawed, fragile, and for once I wasn't the shadow in his light. As the silence stretched, I leaned in close, voice low enough only for him to hear, "Enjoy the view, brother. This is just the beginning." The look he gave me was a mix of fury and disbelief, a silent promise that he wasn't done. But so was I. Tonight the game changed, and I was holding all the cards. The silence after the revelation was deafening, but it didn't last. Life, as cruel as it is, didn't give Eliot much time to process before everything started to fall apart. Like a carefully constructed house of cards, one wrong move, one careless word, and the whole thing collapsed. I watched from the sidelines, like a spectator enjoying the final act of a play I had written. And honestly, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Work was the first to crumble. Eliot's flawless reputation shattered. A major client, one he'd nurtured for years, pulled out after the news got around. Boardroom meetings turned icy. Colleagues whispered behind his back. The man who once commanded respect now struggled to hold on to his job. I heard the news through the grapevine before he even did. One of my friends who worked at the same firm dropped the bomb casually over coffee. Eliot's losing clients, big ones. People don't want to be associated with drama. I let the comment sit, savoring the taste of victory. I wasn't the one losing, it was him. The golden boy, as everyone called him, was suddenly falling from grace. At the same time, friends who once flocked to Eliot started distancing themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. Even his closest pals became strangers. The guy who'd always been the life of the party was now a ghost at his own gatherings. Sarah, too, faced her own isolation. She tried to justify herself, explaining that she felt trapped, unloved, and unseen in their marriage. But apologies and excuses only pushed people further away. I saw her attempts to reconnect, only to be met with cold shoulders and raised eyebrows. One afternoon, I ran into her at the small cafe where we first talked. She looked tired, not just physically, but something deeper. "Christian," she said softly, "I never wanted it to hurt this much." I nodded, masking my satisfaction. Sometimes the truth hurts more than lies. She sighed. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just scared. I let her words hang between us, knowing that fear wasn't the problem. It was the betrayal. Back at my place, I sat alone, reflecting on everything. The chaos surrounding Eliot was more than just a series of unfortunate events. It was poetic justice, the universe correcting an imbalance that had festered for too long. My phone buzzed. It was Jake, one of my closest friends, calling to check in. "Hey man," he said, "I gotta ask, do you really have no regrets? This whole thing with Eliot and Sarah?" I smiled. None. Not a single one. Jake was quiet for a moment. "I get the anger, but sometimes I wonder if it's worth the cost. Family's family, you know? Family isn't always about loyalty," I replied. "Sometimes it's about survival." He chuckled softly. "You're cold, man, but I respect that." Those words stuck with me. Cold, maybe I was. But cold was what this game demanded. Warmth would have made me weak. Over the next few weeks, I pieced together updates about Eliot's unraveling life like trophies on a shelf. Every lost client, every broken friendship, every sleepless night was a small win etched in my mind. One evening, I drove past Eliot's house. The porch light was off, the windows dark. It looked abandoned, or maybe just empty inside. I wasn't proud of what I'd done. No, I was satisfied, because for once I had taken control of my story. I wasn't the shadow lurking behind Eliot's light anymore. I was the storm that tore through it. As I turned away, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah, apologizing for the pain but still hinting at confusion and regret. I typed back simply, "No regrets, no looking back," because sometimes destruction is the only way to rebuild. I guess by now you're wondering what kind of monster I am. The guy who slept with his brother's wife just to ruin him? The villain in this little family drama? Well, pull up a chair. I'm about to give you the inside scoop. No filter, no apologies. First things first, I'm not here to pretend I'm a saint. I'm definitely not the hero in this story. But evil? Not exactly. More like a guy who got tired of standing in the shadows while his brother basked in the spotlight. You see, Eliot was always the golden child, the one who got the promotions, the compliments, the smiles from mom and dad, the perfect husband, the successful businessman, the guy everyone loved. And me, I was the afterthought, the one nobody noticed unless something went wrong, the backup plan, the lesser brother. It wasn't just envy, though. It was the feeling of injustice, like life had dealt me a bad hand while Eliot was dealt a royal flush. And no matter how hard I tried, no matter what I did, I was stuck playing second fiddle. It drove me crazy. So, when Sarah came into the picture, I saw an opportunity, not just to hurt Eliot, though that was a sweet bonus, but to prove something to myself, that I wasn't just the other brother, that I could take what I wanted, that I wasn't invisible. People like to think families are built on unconditional love and loyalty. Cute idea, really. But families are messy. They're complicated webs of jealousy, resentment, and unspoken grudges. The kind of things nobody admits at Thanksgiving dinners because it would ruin the mashed potatoes vibe. And trust me, I've had my fair share of grudges. The sarcastic comments from my parents about my lack of ambition, the sideways glances from family friends when Eliot's name came up, the feeling that no matter what I did, I could never measure up. So yeah, when I decided to sleep with Sarah, it wasn't just about breaking Eliot. It was about breaking the cycle, about shaking things up so hard that the whole damn house would feel the tremors. Am I proud of it? Sometimes. Other times, I wonder if I went too far. But then I remind myself, life isn't a fairy tale. Nobody gets a perfect ending. We all have skeletons in our closets, dirt on our shoes, and some nights we stare at the ceiling wondering where it all went wrong. Here's the truth. I don't think I'm a villain. I think I'm a man who saw an unfair game and decided to play by his own rules. A man who's tired of being the understudy in his own life. Sure, my methods are questionable. Sure, some might call me cold or cruel. But I prefer to think of myself as realistic. Because in the end, the world doesn't owe you happiness. It owes you nothing. You have to take what you want, or get left behind. And before you judge me too harshly, consider this. Eliot wasn't some innocent angel. He had his flaws, his secrets, his moments of selfishness that no one talked about. Sarah wasn't a saint either, trapped in a marriage that was golden on the outside but hollow inside. So, maybe none of us are innocent. Maybe this whole story is just a messy tangle of human desires and mistakes. And I'm just the guy who decided to cut through the mess with a sharp knife. Funny thing is, after all this chaos, I still laugh at the absurdity of it all. At how family dinners used to feel like rehearsed plays, and now they're more like chaotic improv. At how people pretend everything's fine while sipping wine and avoiding eye contact. Life is messy. People are messy. And sometimes, you have to be a little messy too. So here I am. Christian, the bad guy in my brother's story. The man who took what wasn't his. And I don't regret a damn thing. Because in the end, maybe that's all any of us want, to be seen, to be heard, to matter. And if breaking a few hearts along the way is the price, well, then so be it. So, where are Eliot and Sarah now? Well, that's a story with its own twists, and maybe a few surprises. Eliot? He's not exactly the golden boy anymore. The company he worked for lost a major client, probably because he was too distracted to close the deal. Word around town is that he's been keeping a low profile, nursing bruised pride and an ego that's taken a serious hit. Family gatherings? Yeah, those are awkward now. People don't quite know how to act around him. It's like watching the star of the show fade into the background, a spotlight that's dimmed, maybe permanently. Sarah's doing okay. Not great, not terrible. She left Eliot, of course, but that didn't turn her life into some glamorous rom-com. Instead, she's been trying to figure out who she is outside of the perfect wife role. Spoiler alert, it's not easy. There were moments of guilt, plenty of tears, and a lot of soul searching. She moved to a smaller place, started a few new hobbies, and, most importantly, learned to be honest with herself. Funny how sometimes losing everything makes you find something you didn't even know you were missing. And me? Well, I'm still here. The one who started this whole mess, watching the pieces fall where they may. Did I end up alone? Maybe, but I don't mind the silence. It's peaceful. And honestly, it's kind of refreshing not to play a role anymore. No more pretending to be the less successful brother. No more biting my tongue at family dinners. Instead, I've started thinking about what's next. Because life isn't about standing still. It's about moving forward, even if the path is a little twisted. I'm not going to lie. I have plans. Big ones. Maybe even a new target, though that sounds a little too dramatic. Let's just say I'm thinking strategically. After all, once you've learned how to play the game, it's hard to step off the board. Tonight, I'm walking through the city streets, the neon lights flickering above, the hum of distant conversations swirling around me. It's quiet but alive, kind of like me right now. I stop by a bar I used to avoid, order a drink, and think about all the chaos I've caused. Here's the thing, I don't regret what I did. Not for a second. Because sometimes you have to break the mold to build something new. Sometimes you have to make a mess to find clarity. So, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you stay silent and suffer in the shadows? Or would you step into the light, even if it means burning a few bridges along the way? I guess that's the real question. Because life doesn't come with instructions. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes downright unfair. But it's also full of chances. Chances to take control, to rewrite your story, to become who you really want to be. As I finish my drink and step back into the night, I'm ready for whatever comes next. Maybe it's redemption. Maybe it's more chaos. Maybe it's something I haven't even imagined yet. But one thing's for sure, I'm done being invisible. And you? Well, what would you do?